Hi, this is Matt Marchant, and I'd like to take a minute of your time and talk about anger. It's my belief that everybody has anger and everybody will deal with anger at some point in their life. I think where things are different is how we express that anger or how we process that anger. So I've come up with an acronym that I use in understanding my own anger, and that is to AAA my own anger. Now, as I discuss this is going to sound maybe pretty simple, like it's just real simple to do. You just kind of do these three things and it's done with. But although the process can be simple, it's definitely not easy, and this process can take time. It's not something that's going to happen in a minute, although it can, but this is something that might happen over days, weeks, even years. So AAA your anger is what I've called it. And again, this just helps me to understand my own anger, so maybe it will help you understand your anger as well. Number one is to acknowledge anger. Obviously, the first step in anything, especially when we're talking about emotions like anger, is to acknowledge that we have anger. What's the opposite of acknowledgement? I believe it's denial. So that's why I said in the very beginning, it's my belief that everybody has anger. Everybody will have to deal with anger at some point. If we are in denial of our own anger, well, obviously it's impossible to understand it. The funny thing about denial is it can be like the mafia. Once you get into that state of denial, it's very hard to get out. And so the deeper and longer that we stay in denial about our own anger, it's just going to make it that much more difficult to get out. So step one in our AAA little acronym here is we have to acknowledge it. But from here, we've got to move on to the next phase. If all we do is just acknowledge, like, hey, I'm angry, that's a great first step. But in my understanding of my own anger, it doesn't end there. Next one, the second A, is accept your anger or accept my anger. So accepting anger would be the next one. So now that we've acknowledged it, we're going to accept it. I think the major point in accepting anger is taking responsibility that anger comes from within us. Anger is not something that someone else can create within us. It might seem like that, but I would disagree with that. I would offer you this, is that no other person, thing, or circumstance can create anger within you. Only you can create anger. And likewise, only I can create anger. So the next step is taking acceptance of that anger and going, okay, I take responsibility for it. If it's coming, if it's my anger, I take responsibility. Where is this coming from? So in accepting anger, I think many times we can do what I have called playing emotional hot potato. If you remember that game as a kid, you take something, whether it's, I don't know if it's a real potato, but you toss it to other kids in a circle as fast as you can. And I think that we do that a lot of times with certain emotions. I think anger is one of those, is that as soon as we start to feel angry, if we believe one of the myths of anger, that anger is bad, which I don't believe is true. If we believe that myth, though, then we're going to think that, oh, well, we're bad if we have anger. Let's get rid of this. Let's project this. Let's toss this anger away. So we're kind of playing an emotional game of hot potato with our anger. When we stop doing that, we can accept it. The last A and the third A is appreciate your anger. And this is where the process starts to get fairly deep as we start understanding what I believe to be the gift of anger. And we can start asking ourselves questions like, where is this anger really coming from? What are the root emotions that are producing this anger? Could anger really just be a symptom for something deeper? And also, I think an interesting question is, what am I hiding by using anger? And when I'm talking about using anger, I'm talking about using it in whether it's an active or a passive way, whether you're acting out in rage or whether you're acting out in a passive-aggressive way. There's many forms of anger. In my opinion, there's a very broad spectrum on how we express that. And so in this third phase, we start to ask ourselves some questions, and that's where we get deeper into the processing of anger. And I believe all three of these A's, whether it's acknowledge, accept, or appreciate, is the process of processing anger, which is a lot different than expressing anger. So it's my belief that if we can start with this process, or maybe a different process, perhaps you have your own process that you go through with anger, or your own acronym or whatever, but this is something I've created. And like I said in the very beginning of this video, this is not something that necessarily will happen in a moment, meaning if we react out in anger, it might take us a couple days before we even are aware and can acknowledge that we were angry. Or we might be aware right after we get done being angry, whether it's an active form or passive form of anger. But it could take a while before we accept it, and it could take an even longer while until we can appreciate it. Like I said, in that third A, the appreciation of anger, this is where we really take time and we ask ourselves some deeper questions as to what this anger, where does it come from, and how can I turn this anger into something positive in my life. So that's something I've come up with. Triple A your anger, acknowledge, accept, and appreciate. I hope this helps. It's helped me in just understanding myself and my anger a lot better. Thank you. This is Matt Marchant.